organizations, in most cases, were managed in different ways, much more in a hierarchical way. And what he was also talking about, and that's also what we see, it is more and more about working and dealing with this complexity. But the only thing that will help you is to accept the complexity, and instead of being a knower, really showing up as a learner.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest, who will introduce herself. Sonja, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Maurice. And especially after meeting each other in Stockholm a few weeks ago. So my name is Sonja Wekema. I live in the Netherlands and I have worked internationally for the last 10, 20 years. I grew up in a really small town in the eastern part of the Netherlands with parents who came from the north. And that formed me, I think, quite a bit because I was always a bit different. My parents had their own dialect, and the area that I lived in also had their own dialect, but it wasn't proper Dutch. So what I found out quite early on when I was 6 or 7 years old is to speak normal Dutch. And normal Dutch, for people who do not know Dutch, that is the Dutch that we heard on television and on radio. And for some people, especially in my family, that sounded a bit funny because they were not used to people in their family speaking proper Dutch. So at that time, I didn't know that that was a bit special, maybe, but it was me already adapting to where I wanted to go. At some point, I started studying at university, and I studied international relations. I think the main reason is because I have always been really, really curious, like what's happening with unwritten rules, with codes in different areas, different groups where you are part of. And that, of course, is a little bit further. It goes a bit further than just the village that I grew up, also the city that I studied in, but also when, for instance, me, my parents, and my brother, when we went with our tent in a car and just went somewhere in Europe, everything was different. So we even had different currencies at the time. We needed to show our passports at the borders. We always pretended that we were asleep, my brother and I. So, no, but just finding out like how people worked together, how they communicated, what their behavioral patterns were. Of course, I didn't use those names and those words at the time, but it was always really what I was interested in. And therefore, I studied international relations, and afterwards, eventually, I graduated in communications.
And where did you study? In which town?
I studied in Groningen.
Okay. Yeah.
With
And
proper
then
G.
did your brother also go in that direction? Because I'm always interested how come that a brother and a sister or two brothers, that they go in different direction or similar. So is he
Yeah, the
also?
funny thing is, in my mother's family, we are with 11 cousins, and I think 5 of us studied communication.
Really?
So there is something
Yeah.
in our background.
Yeah.
And what I always mentioned also when I was younger, like it doesn't really say that if you study or have studied communications, that you are the expert. It's because you're really curious on, hey, maybe also something that you were lacking in your own youth or something like that. But yet it's always been like a passion for me to understand what people are talking about, what their intention is, and if they can put their ideas across. And that's still what I'm working on.
Okay. And just for the listeners who don't know about the Netherlands, because assumptions are dangerous always sometimes, right? So Groningen is in the north of the little country of the Netherlands. So which actually is a town where I've never been. So and I've been away from the Netherlands for quite some time, 30 years, but even those years that I lived and worked in the Netherlands, I never went to Groningen because I thought it was so far away, which is kind of
that's
funny
what
now
everyone
because of
thinks, especially when you live there. That's also when you're a student, that's the nicest thing because no one's coming to bother you. Yeah, no, but in the summer, I remember also like studying there. It felt like a student island, and in the summer it was completely deserted. Then the locals were there, and all the students were gone because they wanted to go on holiday, or at some point their parents also wanted to see them. Probably. No, but Groningen, especially for the local community, like they are known for just using two words, where the people, for instance, in The Hague, where I currently live, where they use 20 sentences. So that's a bit of a difference.
It's funny. And so just a quick question about your brother. So did he go into communication as well?
Yeah, of course he did.
Okay.
So you were right. You're on the right path, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, and he even went to Groningen.
Really?
He came there in I think one of the fall breaks or something he had. He was, this is such a nice and vivid city. Let me go there as well. So yeah.
So then from Groningen, when you were done, what happened? You started
Yeah,
working,
I
or did you go
studied,
for
in
further
the end,
study?
I studied a bit of international relations, but I finished communications.
Yeah.
And next to that, I was always working as a call center agent. And I ended up being the head, what was it? The manager, the supervisor of the technical help desk of an internet website or whatsoever. What was just starting in the, what was it? 2000, 1999, in that kind of period. So, and I didn't know what I wanted to do after graduation. So I started working for Capgemini Consulting. At that time, it was Capgemini Ernst& Young. I think there was this banking crisis, and a lot of accountancies, they needed to split their consultancy business with the accountancy businesses. So it was Enron. Yeah, and Capgemini and Ernst& Young, they were merged, but they were two completely different organizations with completely different cultures. And I started as a young graduate in the Capgemini culture. And I worked really, really hard because I also came not from the area where the biggest cities are. I came, of course, from the rural area. So I was used to working hard and then hoping that some leader, manager would see me and give me some opportunities. Well, that was quite a culture shock at that time. And when I was reading stories about the immigrants, like for instance, Turkish or Moroccan people, it was always about like the first generation students or people who didn't really understand how universities worked, how to network in bigger organizations. And I felt like I had exactly the same feeling. And I needed to understand, okay, so how do I relate to how the people work in this organization? So, yeah, it was quite a culture shock at that time. But I learned quickly, and with observing and just seeing how other people went to different courses or where they really grew and also grew their skills. So when I found out, I was so lucky to get good managers. And one of them, he was like a hen, but then a male version of it. So whenever there were, for instance, complaints from clients about the consultants, he was one of these role models, I think, afterwards, who said like, okay, that's really not so nice to hear that you're not happy with my consultants. But I'm of that kind of breed that I first want to check with the consultants what's really going on. instead of talking with these clients. So for me, that really felt like a safe environment. And also, we were just put into the ocean, as we said, yeah, learning to swim, but we always knew that there were some safeguards next to the water. So for me, that was a really good starting point, also in my professional career.
So are you managing people now?
No, yeah, more indirectly. So I'm working now in a networking organization, but in my previous job, like I'm now I'm self-employed. I have my own business since 8 years. And before that, I worked for a multinational. And in my last role, I was head of HR, globally. So I was managing maybe 3 people locally. I was based then in the Netherlands, but I also had indirect reports across the world. So some of them were in the US, others in Asia, and others in Europe. And yeah, that is one of the things that I'm also using at this moment. Like, how do you really influence people without direct authority? How do you work in a matrixed organization where nobody is really reporting into someone? Yeah, of course, there's the system who tells you who the manager is and who's making sure that you get paid at the end of the month or the year. Yeah, but in the end, it's also about inspiring people and finding a shared purpose to work towards. And if you cannot inspire people as a leader, yeah, then people at some point will choose to do the things that they like to do and where they can grow and develop. And otherwise, they just disappear.
Yeah, and then your previous boss was an influence on that. So you keep that still in mind, the way he took care of you.
Yeah.
You're trying to.
Yeah, so that first boss, yeah, he was really there always to protect us, but also to challenge us. Like he always said, like, okay, I think there's much more to it. You have more talent to show, even though we didn't know that at that time. And that's also what I now see as something that I have to give back. Like the privilege that I have had in the past with really good managers, of course, also some not so good managers, but also the opportunities working internationally, getting all the education that I gained. Yeah, in the phase that I'm in today, I really feel that I can give something back. So it's all nice that a lot of people are in the game of earning a lot of money, but that's not per se what makes me tick.
Yeah, and I think you're also very capable of writing that very clearly. So we will talk about your book later, but I am, really, really good stuff for the listeners. You need to check out Sonja's books. Can we make a jump then to England? Why did you start to decide to go to England to study there?
Yeah, that's this curiosity thing that's always on my mind. So at some point, I wanted to study again. So I was working for a big organization, and of course, they have internal academies and everything else. But yeah, I came from consulting, and then I ended up in an HR role. Yeah, in an organization where everything was really, organized. But I wanted to also get to know people from the other side of the wall, so to say. So at some point, I decided to start an executive coaching education, a master's in executive coaching. And I heard from someone that the one in the UK at Ashridge, that was probably something that would be fitting with what I was looking for. And the reason for it was that, I was looking for something related to relational coaching. So not just, okay, these are the 20 or 10 steps to guide someone through a coaching process. No, much more about how can you as a person, as a coach, be present? What do you bring with you in the coaching room? So there's also quite a lot on Gestalt, for instance, which we also refer to in the book that we just wrote, and we launched it last week. So it's Leading in the Wicked World. So that's also about like, okay, what are your own personal patterns? What are the stories you're telling yourself? And are those your own stories, or are those the stories that your parents maybe told you? And can you also rewrite those stories if you increase your consciousness or your awareness around your beliefs and your thought patterns and the behaviors that you're showing? And what kind of impact would you like to really bring? Yeah, and that's also related to what we learned in the UK, in London, I should say, because my South African friend is always teasing me with my pronunciation. No, no. So yeah, the relational side of, okay, so how does it feel? What do you think about this? It's much more the wholeness of a person instead of just the head, because I think, especially in the Western world, we are quite well in the thinking side, and we sometimes seem to be have been forgotten really also to use the emotional side and also the elements of vulnerability that give us so much information, and which can be seen as some sort of facts maybe, but yeah, how do you listen to them? And did you learn that from your parents? Well, personally, I didn't. So I needed to relearn it again, or relearn it really.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, about the Gestalt as well, because during COVID, actually, I was in a kind of a leadership group where a company called Turnkey, they used Gestalt to help us cope with the situation. I was interim in charge of my organization, and you came across a lot of things, right, during COVID. And then in the States, well, in Europe, it also had it was also happening, but in the States, there was, Black Lives Matter came on top of everything as well. So anyway, it was really, for me, helpful to then use the Gestalt in my conversations with other leaders who dealt with similar situations or different, but the use of stories to find comfort and in terms of, okay, oh, I can do something with it, I can translate this to my situation. Why did you decide to write a book? How did that happen? I know a little bit, but tell the listeners.
Yeah, well, it was never the intent to write this book. That's in the first place. So writing a book, like, yeah, I heard people who wrote a book. It's like, okay, this is not my cup of tea, probably. So I was always also delegating all that stuff and outsourcing it to others and just buying a lot of books. And you probably, if you can see my area here around me, I'm surrounded with a lot of books. It also brings me a lot of humility. Like, there are so many people who did all the work to get that book together. No, this book, it came together, yeah, after starting at Ashridge it was March 2020. So, and I thought, this is so nice. I will be here for a whole year, diving into a lot of relational coaching aspects, but also enjoying the scenery of this beautiful old castle with a beautiful garden. But yeah, we all know what happened in March 2020. So, but during that session there in March, I met my co-author, Matthias Schramm. So he's German, I'm Dutch. And after the March session 2020, the whole program was put online. So we were all on Zoom. And of course, everyone was quite disappointed because everyone was looking forward to getting some time there at the premises of Ashridge. But Matthias and I, we never really had anything to do with one another. So we were not in the same groups. We did not have shared assignments, but we just had a click. And what that exact click was, yeah, we didn't know at the time. But we spoke with one another every other week for about 30 minutes on Zoom. And initially it was all about, okay, how is COVID being dealt with in your country? And at some point, we also got to those conversations like, okay, how do leaders deal with it? How do we deal with it as parents? And both he and I, we both have two children. They both play hockey. Mine play field hockey, his play ice hockey. So it took us 3 months to find out that it was a different kind of hockey. No, but at some point it was also like, okay, so how can we also make sense of everything we are studying related to our work? So we started writing and we spoke about different elements. And I think after 1 or 2 years, we said, we have so much that we wrote down, and probably, yeah, we have to share it because we are really privileged to be able to live this life and to also be able to study like this and to reflect. And we've seen a lot of countries, we've seen people struggling also in an HR role or in an executive coaching role. People really confide in you, so they tell you a lot. So yeah, we really were of the opinion that other people might be helped with it as well, and not by writing something, writing a book where also a lot of these books around me are talking about. This is, I don't know, these are the 10 steps to be lucky, or these are the 20, I don't know, secrets of being really rich, because we don't really care about that. No, this was all about like, hey, what we saw is that people, in our opinion, it would be so nice if they dared to jump into the unknown, if they dare to pause and reflect and ask a question without already having the opinion up front. And what you just referred to, also with your example with using Gestalt, can you just be? Can you be present, listen, observe, and just wait until you really get that good question? And that is also what I think happened to both of us. Like, if we just are who we are, and if we tune in, then sometimes we ask questions, and those are the questions that need to be asked. And then if people ask us, like, hey, where did this question come from? We just don't know. It just happens. And that's also about trusting the process. And in this book, we thought, okay, it would be so nice to include, yeah, some elements of known stories. So what we did, and that was also quite fun because we had nice conversations about those as well. We reread The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. We watched The Matrix again, but also Space Odyssey. And then during that time, the Barbie film came out. And it was quite interesting because the opening of Space Odyssey is similar to the Barbie's opening. So there are these linkages also from, yeah, things from the past and from the present. So, but if you don't know these things, yeah, you might be surprised. So those are elements that we also put in the book to give people some perspectives and also to make them think. And I think what the most important thing is of this book is that we do not fill it all in, and that we let the reader really make their own story of what we have written. And also we ask them questions, questions to think, to also reflect on their own lives and their own behavior in a more critical way, but eventually to take action and to create a sustainable society, because that is what we need to do.
Are you happy with the final product?
Well, as I said, we never really wanted to write this book. So it just happened or something. I don't know. So at some point, and the answer to your question is yes, very happy. And the reason for it is at some point we found an editor, and this editor, I also don't remember how we got to her. It was also in this COVID period where people, yeah, they were a bit bored. So we said, like, which editor, native speaking, English native speaking, would like to do a funny new project for which we don't know yet what the outcome will be. So we found an American lady living in Amsterdam and teaching at the University of Groningen, where I studied. So she's teaching journalism. So hey, that's another maybe coincidence or synchronicity, you might call it as well. And at some point we asked her, okay, so we wrote something down. Can you make some sense out of it and just write it in the way that you think, hey, this is the style that would fit us? And she came back with that initial text, and we were really blown away. Like, did we write this? No, of course, she helped us, but our ideas and our thoughts were really still there. So she did a wonderful job. So yeah, in the end, she just wrote and edited the whole book with us. And along the way, she also said, like, I learned so much from you because all these things that you're talking about, of course, I had a hinge somewhere, but I didn't know all this stuff. So we were all enjoying the whole process, and it gave us a lot of energy. And then at some point, of course, we wanted to also put some illustrations in, because just to have a book with only text, yeah, already when I was little, I didn't like it. So I thought, okay, maybe let's just also make it a fun book to see. And also for people, if you go into a train, some people, of course, they still take a plane, but yeah, it was our idea to, yeah, with one train ride, it should be a bit longer maybe than a regular one in the Netherlands. But you should be able to just glance through it, read it, and get some ideas. So we found some really nice young German artists who illustrated the book. And it's quite, if you see it, and people can see it on my website as well. It's fresh, and it has really nice features, but it also has some elements related to MC Escher. And MC Escher, the artist or mathematician, I think he didn't want to be called like that, but he is the creator of really interesting visuals that you can look at and think, okay, how does this work? And it doesn't work, but he's really the master of patterns. And a lot of illustrators didn't dare to really work on whatever he was doing. So these German artists, they did. So there is the mixture of elements from these different stories, Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, but also MC Escher. And those are the illustrations, also related to the content of the book. Yeah, and we are really, really pleased with it.
No, and I think you should be. And I think it's a great book. Well written. I told you this, and it reads really easy. And I mean, complex stuff, but explained in an easy way, and then you can do something with it. Yeah, it's well done, and because it's not easy what you both are trying to address. The question that I have for you is, you know, I think we are, as you mentioned, we are in this wicked world, you know, faced with wicked problems. So why should people read this book in order, because you know, we are seeing an increase in mental health issues, struggling with changing situation. Why should people read a book? How will it help them to cope with what's going on in the world today?
Yeah. Well, last week I would have given you a different answer than this week, because last Thursday we had a really wonderful networking session where we brought 60 people together in a castle in the Netherlands, people from different sectors, different industries, and we asked them this question. And yeah, initially they all started with, okay, this is my situation, so this is how I am coming to this session. And we gave them some really nice, talks of people. Like we had one speaker, he's an ex-colleague of mine, but he has Indian roots. And he really shared a story around like, hey, what is the history of leadership from the 80s until now, and maybe also to the future? And in the 80s, yeah, organizations in most cases were managed in different ways, much more in a hierarchical way. And what he was also talking about, and that's also what we see, it is more and more about working and dealing with this complexity. But the only thing that will help you is to accept the complexity, and instead of being a knower, really showing up as a learner. So instead of saying, hey, this is what it is, yeah, that might be it for today. But tomorrow, your life or the world might look really different. So, and that's also what we got back from the people there, but also from readers from the book, that they said like, okay, so I feel really overwhelmed, but reading this book, it creates some space in my head. And it also shows me I'm not the only one. So apparently you wrote a book, not just for me, but for more people than just me. So apparently that's what readers say. Yeah, there are more of people like me out there. And bringing these kind of people together, and also having them work on, yeah, different dilemmas, because that's also what we talk about. There are wicked world dilemmas. So how do you deal with electrification, with AI, with robotization, with climate change? There are so many different things. And every time you think, now I understand it, the world is changing again. And you cannot be the expert. So the most important thing and the most important learning from this book is that if you do not open up, and if you do not embrace different perspectives, and if you do not start working together, then probably your life and your world will not change for the better. And if you do, and that is what we do also with my two different businesses, so we work with organizations to make some sense out of it and to help them, yeah, increase the psychological safety for them to speak up and to also say the things that might not be, yeah, so nice for others to hear. But in the end, it's all about taking your personal accountability so that you can take also the shared accountability and to increase the performance. Because if you create growth, you can create the development as well, and then you can innovate. But if people are scared, they won't open up and they won't learn anymore. And yeah, I think also looking at the work that I've personally done with neglected organizations, if organizations have not spent any time, money, or energy on the people, yeah, don't be surprised that it might take at least 6 to 7 years to get back to a sense of normal. And the people working there, for them, yeah, this culture is normal until they hear that it can also be done in a different way. And opening up these different vessels with energy, because a lot of these people, if you speak with them one-on-one, and it can be just in 30 minutes, you can see that little child in their eyes again. And if I see people, like also operators, for instance, in chemical factories working with machines, saying, oh yeah, I already addressed this issue once or twice or 6 times. I'm so fed up, I won't say it anymore. But if you give them some hope, and if you give them some real attention, and if you show them that you bring everything together with what this person and their colleagues are talking about, and you whisper it to the leaders who need to make the decisions, and things are changing, they believe in it again. So there's a lot possible, but you need to do something first yourself and then with others. And that's also the story of this book.
And we need to dance more. That's what I got
We
from
need
the
to
book.
dance more for sure. Yeah, so that's a nice segue also to the last chapter.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to dance, you need to be able to be centered. And to be centered, you need to first know where your core is. And then you need to also strengthen your core. Because if you are not centered, a ballerina will fall over. So that's quite important. And the dancing with the wicked world, of course, for us, it's also referring to celebration. Yeah, so, and that's what we did on Thursday as well. Like the initial session that we organized, yeah, it is really like my mother might say the devil is playing with it. But leading in a wicked world, if you want to launch your book and then 2 days before the launch date, your father passes away, which happened in my case, we just postponed it. But last Thursday, we organized it anyway, also to celebrate life and also to celebrate and honor my father. So all the proceeds of this book, they go to the Dutch Cancer Fund to just also help the research, but also to help the people who have beaten cancer and to have them reintegrate into their normal or what used to be normal life. So that's what we try to give back also to the world.
Thanks for sharing that, Sonja, and sorry for your loss. Yeah, well, I unfortunately also know how it is to lose your parent. Well, I lost both my parents. I would like to make a jump to questions that I always ask to my guests, and they are related. That this podcast is a spin-off of 100-mile walk that I've been doing since 2012 to raise awareness and some funds around hunger, justice, injustice, and poverty. The question that I have for you is maybe related to what we just discussed, and because the world identified 17 sustainable development goals to make our lives, and our world more sustainable, just. It's not perfect, but discussions were held. So the question that I ask to my guest is, what do you want the listener to know about the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, Sustainable Development Goals, of course, I think a lot of people know that they were launched in Paris in 2015. There's 17 of them. And the organizations that we work with, they underline or they really support the SDGs. At least that's what they say. Some of them, they find it really important. For others, it's more like, hey, we have to do it. But what we try to do as well, especially with the leadership programs that we are working on, is to make people feel what these SDGs are all about. So, and a few years ago, the SDGs, of course, in the end, it is to create a better and more prosperous and sustainable world where people can still live in and that we can work and live together with nature. And what is always interesting is that we hear quite a lot of people saying there's humans and there's nature. But in the end, it's all the same. So instead of us deciding for the world, okay, this is what needs to happen, a bit of humility is probably needed as well. And what we have done, for instance, in leadership development programs is help people understand what these SDGs are and where people locally can make a difference. So what is, of course, important for multinationals is to have a strategy around it. But that strategy is not always known by the normal employees. So how do you bridge that gap? And how can you also make people choose and select what they can do on a small scale? So one of the things we did with one of the organizations that we work with is just speak about what can you do locally. And what is quite interesting, we did that with 19 different groups, and we brought per group 4 people together, and we asked them, okay, so what are you already doing? And also, what can you do? And we asked them to write that down in half an hour. What can you do after this session to really make it happen? And the most interesting thing of this is that a lot of these people, they said, what I really want to do is to help the children understand how, for instance, nature works. Where do eggs come from? Where does milk come from? Not from a factory, no, from a cow, you know. Some children also came back with, hey, are eggs really growing on a tree? Well, of course, that's not the not the case. So just to start with the basics. That is what we saw a lot of people do. But others also said, hey, we have this network, we have budget, we can do much more. So they, instead of waiting for like, yeah, the strategy of the multinational to finally hit them, they said, okay, we can do something ourselves. So they started creating like the solar panels on the roofs. They increased the number of electric vehicles and they charged them with the electricity that they got from the solar panels. They had nice stories around it. They created publicity. And if you look at the different SDGs, this is not just one SDG that they were touching. They were touching many more. And that's also what I think the development that we see in organizations is that initially some organizations said, okay, let's select 3 or 4 SDGs. So maybe I have the card here in front of me, but my eyes are not so good anymore. So yeah, but the no poverty element,
SDG 1, yeah. SDG 2
so
is the
that's number
hunger.
1. So
SDG
that's an
5
important.
is the gender, yeah.
Yeah, the gender equality, but also the clean water and all that. But especially for us, important is the partnerships. So if you want to do something, and that's also related to what we are talking about in the book that we just referred to, you cannot do everything yourself anymore, not as an organization, not as a human being. So yeah, creating a shared goal and in the IDG, so the inner development goals, there is the picture of a flower, and in the center is move what matters. And that is also what we try to do with the people that we work with, is really dive deeper into that core. So what is really motivating you to do the work you do? And why do you do this work? And if you understand why you do what you do, or also when you're, for instance, in a situation or in a context that is not linked to your values, going back to mental health, that might also be the cause of people getting ill. So that's important. And one of the things we did last year, and people were really scared about it, we said, okay, so let's talk about the SDGs. What do they mean? What do people know? And really create a dialogue around it, and also hear some really good stories, but also hear from people who feel like this is not part of my work. I cannot do anything about it. But then finding ways and being creative to do something anyway. So that's how we started. And then introducing the inner development goals, so much more related to the behavioral side and to also to the mindset and the how you are really gonna deploy these SDGs. What we did there is we used mindfulness activity just for people to land and to really get close to their own feelings and to feel, okay, what do I want to drive? So that's the move what matters. And what we also did is, and for some people that was really scary, we asked them to prepare a 1-minute sentence, speech, whatever, to inspire other people. And those other people might be like their family members, their colleagues, their clients, can be anything. And we asked them to come into a studio. We put a camera on or in their face, so to say. And we said, okay, so let's just have you say this in 1 minute. And we had a timer. And of course, that was quite interesting to film these people. But what was even more important is that they had this mini coaching session of 5 minutes. And they really got to the core of their being. And that was the most, beautiful intervention that we have ever done. And we never expected that to be that impactful. But hearing people talk about what they really, really find important and then linking it to their own context and what they are doing, it really opens people's minds and hearts.
Thanks for sharing that, Sonja. And what is really great, because you made the bridge between the SDGs and the IDGs. Just for the listeners who are not familiar, is the SDGs on average, we are there. We should reach them before 2030, but only at 15 to 70%. And then people around the world, and one of them said, okay, but if you want to change these processes and structures, you also need to work on your ability, skills, and knowledge around those. And to make a long story short, 5 inner development goals were developed: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And then skills were also identified that you need to work on. And how I always compare it with a 6-pack, I don't have it anymore. I used to have it. I did not have to do anything for it. But at a certain moment, you have to train the muscles, otherwise they will be gone. So this is the same with empathy, critical thinking, etc. So that's what you did with that group. So awesome example of how these things are related and what you can do. Time is going fast, and I still would like to ask you a couple of questions. So if we can go more into a rapid fire type of situation. You're talking about the dance. That's what I picked up. For dance, you need music, some kind of rhythm. I ask a question about music to all my guests, and most of them they think that's the most difficult question. But if I ask you to come up with a song or a piece of music that represents for a big part what you are about, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
Yeah, I've been giving that some thought, because I really like a lot of different types of music. And also during that session on Thursday, we had a singer and a musician and a DJ afterwards. Yeah, and one of the songs that she's sung was "Wonderful World," and everyone knows this song, or at least should know this song. And especially if you hear it like in this audience and you sing it together, then the only thing, at least I feel, is we can complain and we can hear people moan all the time, but also let's look at like how wonderful this world is and can be. And in the end, it's also about feeling the love for yourself and for others. And I think that's in the end what will bring us together again. And that's also how we as humans, and I think Yuval Harari is talking about that in his books as well. Like, hey, we are coming up with the stories that in the end we need to believe to survive. And if you do not feel some sort of love, then the world is not looking at as wonderful as it can be.
Love is also about connecting, being an ability to connect. I hope that through this podcast, I'm connecting, people with people, listeners with you, me with you. I'm going to connect you with my previous guest, and the previous guest has a question for you. And the question is,
I would like the next guest to share with us who inspired him or her a lot and why. and in what way that has influenced the person concerned.
Yeah, also there it is so difficult to choose because there are so many people, but also, yeah, maybe just pictures or paintings or that inspire me. So I get my inspiration from a lot of different things. But one of the people, at least that comes back quite often, is Frida Kahlo. And yeah, I went to different museums to see her work. I saw some of the films about her life. And even though, yeah, she went through quite tough phases in her life, she found ways to really create beautiful art from it. So instead of sitting somewhere in the corner, embracing also the pain and embracing the emotions and showing her vulnerability and creating the art that she created. Yeah, that is quite, yeah, I really admire her for that one. And what I also really like is I'm doing a PhD research on leader vulnerability. And one of my interviewees, so it's one of a senior leader in an international organization, at some point he was referring to a song by Coldplay. And he said, sometimes I feel like either I or my colleagues are puppets on a string. And he said, do you know this song? I said, yes. There's even the word wicked in the song text, but it is Viva la Vida. And when I was looking up like the background of Viva la Vida, the song text, it came back to Frida Kahlo because she has a painting, Viva la Vida. And Coldplay also, they created quite a nice clip together with Anton Corbijn. The beaches here of Scheveningen, close to where I am, and showing Chris Martin as, I think, Louis XIV. Getting, yeah, I can also be the other Louis. I'm not so great at my history. No, but just showing it, like what can happen if at some point you turn to be the king and you forget what it is to be linked also to the normal people, the bourgeoisie. So yeah, I think Frida Kahlo started this, Coldplay took it over, and then my interviewee told me that he felt like people in the song of Coldplay. So it all links together. So that's what I always do.
And I'm going to cheat a bit, so I'm going to add 2 songs for you. So because I think that would be cool to have the Coldplay song as well as part of the playlist that we developed. If you go to Spotify and you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you will find all the songs that have been picked by my guests. I had forgotten to mention that. So your question for the next guest.
Yeah, my question for the next guest is always like a lot of questions have already been asked. But my question would be, and I need to really improvise now because I haven't even prepared a question. So maybe my next question for the next guest is, how do you make sure that you can be you?
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Any question that I should have asked you but didn't?
I think we've covered quite a lot. No, I don't think so at this time. Maybe I have one. Maybe a question you could have asked me is if this book is the only book I've written.
Is it?
Well, no.
I knew that. So I was just playing.
COVID, in COVID, apparently we had 3 ovens. And I co-authored 3 different books. And also here, for the people who see me on video, you can see them standing here. So Leading in a Wicked World is one that just came out. Before that, I wrote together with 4 other executive coaches. We wrote 7 perspectives on leadership, insights from the coaching room. And with my colleague, who I'm running leadership development programs with, we created the book, the Leadership Journey, with a lot of practical tools for leaders who are on their journey and who might also, need some models and some ideas to bounce ideas with colleagues off as well. So 3 books.
Congratulations. And we will make sure that, I will mention them in the podcast notes with the links so that people can, go to the library, or better, buy the book. Yeah, thank you so much, Sonja. I mean, we could talk for many more hours. Maybe we should do that later in the year again, next year, 2025. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your stories, your wisdom. And I really, really enjoyed the book. So I think you should be really proud. It's I've told already many people that they should read it, because it's very. I'm a fan of the philosopher Ken Wilber, and for me, you have touched upon many things in what he's trying to say in his books, and but in a more an easier way. You go to the essence, what my interpretation is of his work. I mean, I know he has a lot of layers in it. But what I understand out of it, you are also touching upon that. So that's really great.
Thank you for the compliment. It's always like when you write a book, of course, how people are responding to it, you never know. So that's the biggest surprise afterwards. So thank you for your nice words, and
No, and I
also
also
for
like
having
that
me.
and I like that you end the book with the dance. My listeners know that I often talk about the dance of, the good, the truth, and the beautiful, religion, science, and the arts. I really, more and more, I believe that. I mean, you also talk about your book about the journey. I think we should not be actually on a journey, because we're on a journey. We often there is a final destination. I think there should not be a final destination. What I like about the dance is you dance. You're in a space and you dance. So and if we would be less concerned about something that we need to achieve, I think it would be a much better world. So that's my 2 cents for the world
The
today.
last page of the book is also whatever people think is the end might even be the beginning. So it's just continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great words to end with. So thank you so much, and good luck with everything you do.
Thank you, and you.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.